Imagine a king so powerful he defied the Pope, beheaded queens, and ruled his realm with absolute authority. Yet when death came for Henry VIII, it showed no respect for crowns or titles. By the end, his once imposing body had ballooned to nearly 400 pounds. An infected leg ulcer oozed a foul stench so strong that courtiers could smell it 3 rooms away. His skin cracked under the strain, leaking fluids that stained his bed and clung to the air like a curse. Even after he finally breathed his last, the horror wasn't over. As his coffin waited to be buried, the pressure of decay forced it open. Putrid liquid seeped onto the floor, where legend says a stray dog lapped it up. This was no ordinary death. This was the final humiliation of England's most feared monarch, and it was only the beginning of the story. Henry VIII was never meant to rule. Born on June 28, 1491, he was the second son of Henry VII, a spare heir overshadowed by his older brother, Arthur. While Arthur trained to wear the crown, young Henry was destined for a quieter life in the church or the diplomatic halls of Europe. But fate is rarely predictable. In 1502, tragedy struck when Arthur died suddenly at just 15 years old. In the space of a heartbeat, the burden of the Tudor dynasty shifted onto Henry's shoulders. The kingdom he inherited was fragile, its stability resting on his untested youth. Some saw it as a blessing, a chance for a fresh start after years of civil war. Others sensed that placing such power in the hands of a boy might spark something darker. No one could imagine just how far he would go to protect his throne. When Henry VIII became king at 17, he seemed every inch the Golden Prince. Tall, broad-shouldered, and strikingly handsome, he looked more like a champion knight than a monarch. Courtiers marveled at his energy. He hunted, danced, jousted, and hosted grand banquets that dazzled Europe. He was more than just a warrior king. Henry spoke Latin, composed music, and wrote passionate love letters. His court glowed with culture, attracting scholars and artists eager to bask in his favor. To many, this was a new renaissance, an age of brilliance after decades of turmoil. Even the Pope took notice. When Henry published a fierce defense of Catholic doctrine against Martin Luther's reforms, Rome awarded him the title Defender of the Faith. But behind the charm and ceremony, the seeds of conflict were already being sown, seeds that would one day split the kingdom in two. Henry's first marriage to Catherine of Aragon was born of duty and politics. She had been his late brother's widow, and marrying her kept her Spanish dowry safely in English hands. For years, Catherine was a loyal queen, but as time passed, her failure to produce a surviving son gnawed at Henry's pride. When Anne Boleyn arrived at court, everything changed. Unlike other women, Anne refused to be just another mistress. She demanded a crown. Obsessed, Henry begged the Pope for an annulment, claiming his marriage to Catherine offended God. But Rome refused, fearing the political fallout with Spain. Driven by passion and desperation for a male heir, Henry broke from the Catholic Church. In 1534, he declared himself head of a new Church of England, severing centuries of tradition. Monasteries were dissolved. Loyal subjects were branded traitors. Anne Boleyn became his queen, but her triumph was short-lived. When she failed to deliver the longed-for son, Henry's adoration curdled into suspicion. Within 3 years, she was arrested on dubious charges of adultery and treason. He had torn a kingdom apart for her, and in the end, ordered her death without a second thought. In January 1536, Henry VIII's life, and perhaps his mind, changed forever. During a jousting tournament at Greenwich Palace, The king, then 44 years old, was thrown from his horse. The massive animal landed squarely on his legs, pinning him beneath its weight. For 2 long hours, Henry lay unconscious. Courtiers feared he wouldn't survive. Although he eventually awoke, the injury to his right leg never truly healed. A deep wound festered, refusing every treatment. Over time, it transformed into a weeping ulcer that filled the air with a nauseating stench. The pain was relentless. Movement became agony. Exercise was out of the question. As his body weakened, so did his temperament. The vibrant, athletic king grew irritable, paranoid, and unpredictable. Some historians believe that this single accident did more than cripple his body. It unhinged his mind. And in the years that followed, England would pay the price. The jousting accident was only the beginning of Henry's decline. As the ulcer on his leg worsened, infection took hold. Even the finest doctors in England could do little more than cauterize the wound with hot irons or smear it with mercury salves, treatments that only deepened his misery. Unable to exercise, Henry began to swell. His waist expanded from a trim 35 inches in youth to over 50. His weight soared to nearly 400 pounds. Special pulleys were installed to hoist him in and out of bed, and palace doorways had to be widened just to let him pass. His diet didn't help. A daily intake of red meat, sugared confections, and endless ale left his body riddled with gout, heart disease, and possibly diabetes. The stench from his infected leg was so vile that servants carried handkerchiefs soaked in vinegar to mask it. Physical agony turned the king inward. He became suspicious of everyone. He feared poison and demanded that each meal be tasted before it touched his lips. The old charm vanished, replaced by fits of rage and paranoid decrees. Once, he ordered the execution of trusted advisors on little more than rumor. Some scholars believe the brain injury from his fall worsened these tendencies, driving him deeper into cruelty. Whatever the cause, the transformation was complete. The Golden Prince had become a tyrant, rotting alive inside his own palace walls. By January 1547, Henry VIII was a shadow of the king he had been. His body was failing on every front. He could no longer walk without help. Breathing was labored. Pain was constant. Still, no one dared to speak of his death. Under English law, predicting the monarch's demise was treason. So the court maintained a fiction of hope, even as Henry drifted in and out of delirium. On January 27th, he finally accepted that the end had come. He ordered Archbishop Thomas Cranmer to his bedside. Unable to speak, Henry was asked if he died in the faith of Christ. His only reply was a weak squeeze of the hand. In the small hours before dawn, England's most powerful king exhaled his last breath. But even in death, there would be no dignity, only decay. Death should have brought peace, but for Henry VIII, it brought only further disgrace. His immense body decomposed quickly in the winter air. Embalmers struggled to prepare the corpse, and the hastily built coffin was barely adequate for his size. As it rested overnight in Sion Abbey on its way to Windsor, the pressure inside the coffin built up. At some point, the wood cracked. Putrid liquid seeped out, soaking the chapel floor in a sour stench no one would ever forget. According to legend, a stray dog wandered into the chapel and lapped at the leaking fluids. Whether fact or fable, the story stuck. A fitting image of the king who had once ruled everything, now reduced to something lower than any man. Henry had torn down monasteries, beheaded wives, and broken nations. Yet in the end, he could not escape the most humbling truth. Decay spares no one. Henry VIII had spent his life chasing a male heir, believing it was the only way to secure his dynasty. Yet the son he fought so hard for, Edward VI, would die young and sickly. In a final twist of fate, the daughter of the wife he executed, Elizabeth, would outshine them all, leading England into a golden age. His legacy is a strange contradiction. He was a builder and a destroyer, a patron of culture and a butcher of friends. The same hand that signed treaties also signed death warrants. Even centuries later, portraits show him as a mighty figure, broad, confident, invincible. But the truth behind those images is more human and far more tragic. Henry's life ended in pain, isolation, and a grotesque decline that no power could prevent. In the end, he proved that not even a king can conquer mortality or the consequences of his own choices. If you found this story as fascinating and unsettling as we did, please take a second to give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel reach more people who love history. And if you haven't already, subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Every like, subscribe, and comment makes a big difference and helps us keep creating more stories like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.